Well, here we are after a nice but kind of cold day in the Northeast and Northern Mid-Atlantic states with the wind from the Northeast off the cold ocean. But no matter, we'll start to slowly moderate over the next couple. No major storms on the horizon. Even the West is calming down, at least for a while, or at least they will be for a while. All that and more on tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, brought to you by Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system, and you too can join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is on the descriptor to this live stream. And of course, if you do make a purchase of this or anything else from the Tempest by Weatherflow website, use the coupon code WINTER2324 because you know what? If you do, you will get
You'll get 10 big percent off. Yes.
that you will. And here we are.
Here we
And I
are.
and I got my hair done too today. I went an extra month without getting my hair cut because the local place where I go to, the they were having trouble keeping employee. They don't have they lost employees, and there's only one person cutting hair, and there would be a line of people waiting. So today I got lucky. I walked in and was able to get in fairly quickly. So I'm back to my normal. I feel like a human being again.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes when you get too shaggy, you say to yourself, man, I got to get a cut. I got to get it cut. And well, there
Oh
you
yeah,
go.
I call it the reverse Samson effect. You feel better. You feel stronger after you get your hair cut as opposed to before.
Right. Right.
All right. Welcome to everybody on the chat board tonight. Welcome to those of you who aren't on the chat board. In fact, welcome to everybody tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast on this Tuesday night, the 20th of February. Make sure that you are subscribed to my YouTube channel because this way you won't miss the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is usually on Sunday through Thursday at 7:35, but we had to move it back an hour because I had a dinner engagement tonight. And if you like the show, by all means, hit the like button because when we get to 100 likes, Joe Rayo gets to ring his bells. Ding a ling a
Yeah.
ling a ling.
Yeah. Not yet, though. We don't want to ring it. We
Yes.
don't want to over ring tonight.
Che- Cheesy weather models are hinting at a potential snowstorm on March 1st through the 4th, and the NAO is set to become negative at the end of February. Yes, but the cheesy model, the model that is showing that is in and of itself a cheesy model. It is the CFS model, or as we know it as it can't forecast and then use the appropriate four-letter S word. So there's that. Not to say that it's impossible because anything's possible, but you're going to have to prove it to me. So, except for what's going on in California with a slew of winter storm warnings and flood watches and flood warnings and high wind warnings and wind advisories, in other words, a typical winter day in California, um, things are pretty quiet. And it was temperatures kind of struggled today because of the way the high was and the wind that coming in off the water. Because a lot of places didn't get out of the 30s today.
I think we were one of them. I did not get a chance to check the weather station and what we hit, but I don't think we got to 40 today either. Although we had bright sunshine much of the day, but it was a bright day, and tomorrow, Joe, will be another bright day, and temperatures tomorrow pretty much will be on target for where we were at today, and we do see some warming coming our way, but probably not until the end of the week.
Yes, agreed. Gary Crosby is the first tonight. Not only the first to hit the tip jar tonight, but it's the first time he's hit the tip jar. Thank you very much, Gary Crosby, for hitting the super chat tip jar. It gets us a little bit closer to a glass of wine or a beer.
Or Coke or ginger ale.
Whatever. It's fine. Thank you. We appreciate it very much. Yeah, there's no certainly for this weekend, the rest of this week and this weekend, there's really not a whole lot happening here in the eastern part of the United States, Joe. It's like one weather front that comes through Thursday night into Friday morning, with a little low that develops on it, but of course there's no cold air. And then there's a second front that comes through. I think sometime Sunday night or Monday morning, with a little bit of cold air behind it. But other than that, at least and it's not going to last for too long. But again, aside from California, we're getting close to that time of year where March, you start getting these wrapped up lows sometimes in the middle of the country, severe weather outbreaks. So pretty soon we'll probably start to see those get underway.
And March, of course, a crazy month. We can vacillate from very warm to also quite cold, and still a chance we could see a significant snowfall. Although it looks, Joe, based upon what I was looking at today from Climate Prediction Center, especially CPC, they've got a really almost like a blast furnace type forecast for our part of the country through the end of the month and on into the start of March. So if we do see any significant snowfall, we may have to wait until maybe the second or third week of March if things change in that direction.
You know, this winter, if it's been about anything, it's been about short windows, what I would call windows of opportunity that open up. We had a window of opportunity in January that produced a couple of events and some very cold weather. And then we kind of reverted back to what we had. And then we had the window of opportunity that opened up for the first half of February, and that resulted in two snow events. And it really didn't result in a lot, much in the way of cold air. But you know what? It was just enough, and that's really what matters in these situations. When you have a winter like this, you're not looking for Arctic air because you're never going to get it. But if you can get it just cold enough, if it's just seasonal, you can manage to pull it off in the month of February and even into the first part of March. So, there's always a chance that, in spite of the fact that maybe the overall pattern looks unfavorable, that you can get that window of opportunity that opens up for a very short period where maybe you could pull something off. I think that's how we would, you'd have to look at it as far as the next 5 weeks are concerned.
I think I will agree with you. I'm just checking out here the latest X or Twitter feed from Dr. Cohen, who says, "Beware the Ides of March. March predicted to come in like a lamb from much of the northern hemisphere, except for East Asia. But could large polar vortex disruption bring one last gasp of winter to the eastern U.S. and northern Europe?" And he's offering a blog for his blog for an early look. I think that blog you have to pay to see it, but eventually we will have the answer to that interesting question.
Well, look, I will say this about, I just kind of one thing that struck me today, Joe, is that, of course, I don't know about you, but I'm getting, you know, comment after comment about that winter is over. Okay, and winter is over, winter is over, winter is over. Mostly based on whatever the latest long range looks like. And I just find it really amusing because um, before the winter begins and all the forecasts of snow Armageddon across the Northeast and Mid Atlantic states. Of course, everybody buys into that and believes that. Okay, so using that same, and obviously that didn't happen. So maybe the same logic can apply to this, where the more people that come on and say that winter is over, the more I root for just that one, you know, one window of opportunity. Doesn't have to be a big one. Uh, it could be a moderate snowfall, just enough so that you could turn around and say, you know, you know, aha. So, winter, I said, I guess was over. And I guess, we always measure winter, in people's minds, it's about when it snows. So, now look, like I said, folks, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen because a little window opens up for a short period of time, and you'd have to hope that everything sets up just right to see one last winter event. Because if this were an active winter, if this were a winter where we had gotten snowstorm after snowstorm, we'd still be riding it through the month of March and into the month of April. But that's not the case this year for sure.
No, I'm just checking after you look at the latest message from Dr. Cohen, you can look at all of the other messages from other people on the same Twitter feed, and a lot of people are making a lot of people on this feed is are making a lot of big deal about this potential event for March 3 and 4.
All right,
In
you know what? Let's get this out of the way. Go ahead, keep going. I'm gonna pull it up from on Pivotal
give you one
Weather.
example. I'll give you one example. Somebody by the name of Jake Weather or Jake WX says the CFS, which I know is your favorite model, Joe. The
Yes,
CFS,
can't
the C,
forecast doo doo.
which has been correct. He says or he
Oh,
claims
please
the past
stop.
few storms is showing a massive snowstorm for the whole Northeast and Mid Atlantic and even the Carolinas, March 3 and 4. Okay, you know,
Yeah, exactly. Oh, look, okay, so it showed the storms of the last few weeks. Well, you know what? So did the other models did. I mean, in a general sense, not in necessarily pointing to it in specifics. You can't do that till you get into the super long. You know, the way it worked out this year, you couldn't even do that during the storm because everything was, going back and forth in one direction or another. Um, but yeah, I mean, if you want to put your faith in a model that really doesn't work very well in general, that's certainly your choice.
this
I'm
is the
trying.
he's showing the 276 hour model.
Oh well, of course. Then let's just write it down. Uh, You might as well just lock it in.
It was
Well,
initialized. It was initialized on the 0Z CFS. This is the
yes.
0Z CFS, not the 12Z, not the 18. And incidentally, Joe, he's posting from Pivotal Weather, so you may very well have been able to.
Yeah, I'm almost there. I'll bring the zero Z up and show everybody. So this is what it looks like on the zero Z map. So hang on. Um, this is what this is what they're all. You know, it's it's such a reach. You know, you're reaching. Okay, when you start, nobody ever really talks about the CFS model for the most part. Um, Sometimes I'll show the 6 week forecast because that's at least something different that the other models we really don't we really don't see. But when you start falling back on the the CFS model, uh, as your savior, well, that's really to me like really really reaching. And here's what it was doing. So February 29th. So this is the 1st of March with a 1041 high north of Superior, one low up in Vermont, another one in northern Georgia. And of course, you've got all this cold air that the high starts to pull down. And yeah, well, all that purple, by the way, is sleet, just so you know. And, it did have a 97 low near North Carolina, had snowed down to me, believe it or not. And then it, there's a deepening low east of the Delaware coast, and it just sits it there, and then for a day and a half, and then moves it out to the east. Well, guess what? Here's the 12Z CFS, and it's not there. Okay, I'll even roll it back. Let's roll it back. I'm sorry, roll it forward. Um, all right, so back to the 29th. There's a low, one low goes out, and that's it. Cold and dry, kiss it goodbye. It's not even there. And instead, you got a big storm in Colorado, and you know where
Yep,
that's going to wind up.
yep.
Well, this
Oh,
one, although it takes this one straight east for some reason, which they don't often do that. They usually head up to the Great Lakes. But look, as I said, now I'm going to say it for the third time. Could a window of opportunity open up? Sure. Would I forecast it right now? No, I just would.
and there you go, ladies and
And there you
gentlemen.
go.
Thank you very much for tuning in tonight. We'll be back tomorrow
Yes.
on
What?
Casper.
No. Well, it's still tentatively scheduled for tomorrow. By the way, I say tentatively scheduled because you never know. He may change his mind at the last minute. I'm hoping not. All right, we still have flood watches up from San Diego all the way up to a little bit north of San Francisco and inland areas in California. Further east in the Sierra Nevadas, we've got a slew of winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories. I'm sure the winter weather advisories are for like 18 to 24. Let's see. Just for laughs, how about we go to Blue Canyon? Shall I go to Blue Canyon? Why not? Um, Emigrant Gap, Blue Canyon, Nyack Airport. My God, for they have so many names for such a small place. Light snow and fog right now, 34, quarter of a mile, so it's almost S plus. And they're calling it light snow and fog with a quarter of a mile, so I guess I'll trust them that it's not moderate. 1 to 3 inches there, and then another half an inch after that. So that's not any big deal. Let's see. Let me see what their elevation is. Okay, where are we? Um, 5,282 feet. So they're a mile up. They are a mile up. How about Quincy? Quincy, California. How's that? We'll check that out. Quincy, Quincy Road. I guess that's what RD stands for. And they are 3,652 feet up. 1 to 2 is that right going into this evening, 2 to 4 tonight. So 3 to 6 for them. Big deal. I'll go to the winter storm warning area and see what they got. In the San Joaquin Valley / Hanford, California, where it's 26 right now. And snow likely, less than an inch possible into this evening, 2 to 4 inches tonight, 1 to 2 inches for tomorrow. So, I mean, I, they're not going anything crazy. Now, they've been dealing with this since Sunday night, so they've already had snow on the ground. So this is on top of whatever else they got. And so elsewhere, we've got a few winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories in Utah, a few winter weather advisories in south central Wyoming and north central Colorado, and the rest of the country is just, pretty much in shutdown mode.
Yeah, well, the only thing that we have of any significance for the tri-state area is this system that'll be coming in sometime late on Thursday night and pretty much prevalent for the first half of Friday, and then that begins to peter out, and then we get into a clearer, drier pattern over the weekend. But while temperatures on Friday will soar well up into the 40s, to almost near 50, it drops back to probably the mid 30s for a high, along with an increasingly gusty wind on Saturday and into Sunday. And then we suddenly see the temperatures jump back up again for early next week. Monday and Tuesday next week, Joe, I've got high temperatures here in the lower Hudson Valley in the lower 50s. So it's going to be kind of a vacillating pattern of temperatures from mild to cold to back to very mild again. And all of that, again, coming our way later in the week into the weekend.
Right now, we've got a high sitting on the Canada side of New Hampshire and Maine, and another one sitting in the Gulf of Maine. And the ridge is down into North Carolina. And we've got a low that's still way out offshore. And, again, just weak systems, weak weather fronts to the northwest. And then out in the west, the storm system has weakened also off the coast of Oregon now, but they're still getting moisture that's feeding in from the southwest. Let me update this satellite loop. Haven't had a chance to do that. And yeah, there's a solid plume of moisture moving into Southern California and northeastward up into Utah and western Colorado. There's also some heavier cloud cover in Northern California with a gap in between. The east is pretty much nice and clear. In fact, it's fairly clear all the way back to the eastern slopes of the Rockies. So, again, most of the weather across the United States on the quiet side. And as we check out the latest radar in California, northwest of San Diego toward LA, getting in between, getting some heavy rain, probably a couple of thunderstorms in the mix. Then another gap, and then you got another area of heavy rain that's inland of San Francisco. And when it, of course, comes into the Sierra Nevadas, it's in the form of snow. Further north in northwestern California, we've got a couple of special marine warnings for some thunderstorms and some rain that's coming into northwestern California, as well as up into northwest Oregon and northwestern Washington. Some scattered areas of snow in Utah. And in the east, nothing. It's quiet radars up and down the East Coast and all the way back to beyond the Mississippi River. WPC over the next 7 days, a tenth of an inch, just a tenth of an inch of liquid being indicated. So this next front not forecast to do very much. A little bit wetter though in the Ohio Valley from Illinois to western Pennsylvania, south to Kentucky, where we're talking 3/4 of an inch to an inch and a quarter. And Florida calms down. No rain for Louisiana or Texas. In the West, on top of all the rain, they've actually already a lot of these areas, Joe, in California, they've put down a year's worth of rain already. So they're done. Everything from here on in is a bonus. And by the way, I don't know if you saw this, but and I forgot the name of the lake, but there's a dried up lake in Death Valley that is not only no longer dry, but they actually have people are able to use kayaks on them on this lake.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. Apparently it goes, apparently it was dry for like, I don't know, 20 years or something. And every once in a while you get enough rain that it fills up and it actually filled up during the rains from Hurricane Hillary last year. And now, of course, all the additional rainfall on top of it, they they were saying in the story that I saw that it's probably going it's probably going to be there through at least April before the sun starts to evaporate the water. But yeah, they've had so much rain that places that these dried up rivers and dried up lake beds are all filled up with water again.
And this is the same state, and I've said this over and over again in recent days, but I'll say it again. Same state that 3, 4 years ago was not just in drought, but in not even severe drought, but exceptional drought. And people who were, saying, "Oh, we need the water. We need the water. We're desperate. We need." And the interesting thing I can remember about that, Joe, is that when they were going through that drought and lack of any water, a lot of people were saying it's all due to global warming. It's all due to global warming. Well, now we have just the opposite. Now we have tremendous amounts of rain, inundation of rain, and on one of the newscasts, national newscast tonight, had a local weather expert out in California, and he was saying it's all due to global warming and climate change and whatever. And I said, you really can't have it both ways. It's got to be either one or the other. And I mean, and of course, he was bringing up a good point that with the warmer temperatures now, the warmer air is able to hold more moisture, and eventually the moisture is translating into all of this heavy rainfall. But again, I distinctly remember 3, 4 years ago when they were going through a period of extreme drought that I was hearing from, again, the same experts saying it's all due to global warming. So, I mean, what is it? What is it? And of course, I've always said, and I'll say it again, if you have one type of excessive amount of something, heat or cold, wet or dry, that nature eventually will balance the checkbook. And nature is apparently doing that big time to make up for all of those years when there was no precipitation in California and they were bone dry. Now it's just the opposite. The sad part about it, this is living in California, is you can't have there's never Goldilocks weather. It's never just right. It's either too wet, which would lead to mudslides, or too dry, which leads to we got
wildfires.
Wildfires. I'm glad I don't live in California.
Yeah, well, it could be all of the above. It could be none of the above. I don't know. It's not something we're going to solve tonight, that's for sure. Well,
Right.
more big rain coming there anyway. I mean, they've got another inch and a half plus for most of the south coast of California. More heavy precip in the Sierra Nevadas, more heavy precip up through Oregon and Washington State, and up and down the Rockies. And if the trough does go set up in the west, a lot of this is going to wind up being snow. And speaking of snow, this is the probability for at least 2 additional inches on top of everything else that they've had in the West, and it's not widespread. And when it looks like the map looks like this, it's usually pointing to mostly higher elevations, and the valleys wind up getting more rain than anything else. In Utah, fairly high probability for at least a couple. In Colorado, west of Denver, and on into Wyoming. If I switch it to the probability for at least eight, you'll notice it's just a few scant areas here that have that. And of course, in the east, there's hardly anything from the standpoint of the probability for at least two. A little small patch of a whopping 1 to 10% in the Adirondacks and, excuse me, in northern New Hampshire and on up into northern Maine. So we're going to take a look. We're going to run through the GFS here, and I haven't even seen it. This is like my first look at it, the latest GFS run. So I did read somewhere this morning. I didn't the map they put up didn't have the time frame for it, but if this happens, it would go on the list of weird things that have happened this winter. Okay, and that would be talking about the fact that some obscure model that I've never seen they were using was pointing to a system, part of this complex of low pressures that are off the east coast from north of Bermuda down to about Cuba, and that some low was going to form down there over the next week or two, and possibly become a warm core tropical system. So that would really be hilarious if we do wind up getting a tropical storm out of it, and then we could put it on the list of weird things. And it actually does show up on this GFS run at the end toward the end of the period. I'll get to it in a minute. But here are the stuff that's going on in the west. You see the high in the east, the low that's off the coast near Bermuda, kind of lingers around for another day or two. And then once it starts moving, this next front can come by, which is for Thursday into Friday. Maybe a little bit of snow in upstate New York, maybe a little bit of snow up in northern New England. It goes out, turns colder, as you said, Joe. Saturday's probably going to be the chilly day. Might even bring some snow down to me in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and then that goes out, and then we get into a southwest flow. A weak front goes by Monday, and then all this low pressure in the west. My God, it's got some kind of wrapped up 987 low in Kansas that goes up into Wisconsin, into the western lakes, and a million screaming south southwest isobars with a strong cold front late next week. And that goes by, and I don't know why it does this. It's got all this dark blue snow in there. That's not going to happen. And then that's on March 1st, and then that goes out, and then you're just left with high pressure after that. And you're right here, right toward the end, it's got some kind of low that comes out of the Caribbean, and it's east northeast of Cuba, and it's got like a bunch of little wrapped isobars around it on the lower right. You should see it in a second there. If that happens, that'll again put it on the weird list.
Well, remember we used to talk about 2020, all the weird things happening in 2020. Maybe we should add 2024 now to that.
Yeah. Ololid. I hope I said that right. Ololid bangs the tip jar. Thank you, Ololid. And he's the first time. He's new to the channel and first time to hit the tip jar. Thank you very much. Very generous of you. Just looking at the upper air. I mean, yeah, okay. So the NAO goes negative, a, a little negative, and the Arctic oscillation actually goes a little negative. But the problem is that the Pacific North America index is negative too, and the East Pacific oscillation, the EPO, which I always say is the most important one that you want negative, is going to be positive. So there's really no route other than glancing blows of cold air. I mean, there's really no route of to bring down colder air from northern Canada and the Arctic into the eastern part of the United States. Not the way this pattern is setting up. And I'm just looking out. Excuse me. I'm looking out over the next 2 weeks, Joe. I mean, it's most of the time we've got ridging along the East Coast. Little troughs that come through every 4 or 5 days. But most of the time we're going to be dominated by a ridge position, and then the West is being dominated by a very deep trough from Alaska all the way down into the southwestern part of the U.S. It's hard for me to imagine how you're going to get, you're not even going to be able to get a window of opportunity if this upper air is correct.
Do you think the window will even open?
It might not. I mean, it just might not. And by the way, let me just it's so funny how this was. I was reading. There's something else I read today, and it was so pointing out correctly. So the Madden-Julian oscillation. All right, now we're getting super technical. All right, the Madden-Julian oscillation and all the phases. It was forever going into phase eight. Oh, the MJO is going into phase eight. The MJO is going into phase eight. The MJO is going into phase eight. Well, guess what? It never made it. Every time the models were showing that it was going to go into phase eight, it never made it. Now, those of you who don't know, there's 8 phases in the MJO. Without getting too detailed about it, the important thing about it is when it's in phases 8, 1, and 2, that is usually bullish for cold and snow in the wintertime. When it's 8, 1, and 2, it's cold and snow in the wintertime. And then the other phases, I think it's 8, 1, 2, and 3. And then or 8, 1, and 2, and then 3, 4, 5, and 6 is those are warm phases, and then seven is like a transitional phase. So you get to 7, you're just like all you need to. You're just sort of sitting there saying, "Okay, we're at 7." So all it has to do is get a little closer to 8 or get into 8. We could be in a favorable spot. Well, the MJO never made it to phase 8. The polar vortex in the stratosphere, the models were forever showing it splitting, and it never split. Every time it showed it that it was going to split, at best, you wound up with it being elongated for a short time, which sometimes can bring cold air, but it doesn't last. And then every time it wound up instead wrapping up like a tight little ball and going up into Siberia and Europe. So that never happened. So you got the MJO never going to 8. You've got the always forecast to go to 8, but never gets there. The polar vortex in the stratosphere always forecast to split, but it never split. The El Nino, which was supposed to weaken, well, guess what? It never really weakened. It was supposed to, the El Nino was supposed to be central base instead of east base. Well, what was it? It wound up being east base. All those things were not bullish for winter weather in the eastern part of the United States, in spite of the fact that everybody either was forecasting it off whatever models were showing it. And the thing is, they were forecasting it. I should correct that. They were forecasting it over models that were showing it, and the models were all wrong. They were all wrong.
And Anthony on the chat board pointing out DT was wrong. I wonder if
No, I mean, and he admitted it on his, on his Facebook page.
it only shows that
Uh,
we don't have it all figured out yet, folks.
no, so then what's the point of asking about what's the winter going to be like in September and October? What is the point? Because whatever if in September and October if this happens, if in September and October if the models show that it's going to be a cold and snowy winter next winter, it's going to be wrong. It's going to be wrong. If it shows that it's going to be a warm and wet winter with little snow, that's going to be right.
Again, I'm just taking a look here at some of the comments on the chat board, and well, somebody sarcastically, I don't have the exact comment on the chat board here, but somebody was asking Joe, what do we think the winter of 2025 is going to be like? just trying to ring our bells here,
There's too much. There are too many things. There is too much in the atmosphere that needs to be looked at. And everybody, and look, a lot of this stuff is over my head. For me, I don't care about the next 3 months. I care more about the next 3 days. I care about maybe the pattern going out for about a week or two. All right. Beyond that, I find myself just not being able to wrap my head around all of it beyond the short range. And that's I know there's a lot of people that are into the long range, as that's what they do, and some people are better at it than others. But it's just very frustrating because there's a sort of obsession from there's a lot of people who are just basically obsessed with the idea of having to know 3 months in advance what the weather is going to be like during the coldest part of the year. And I get the snow weenie part of it, but then they get put so much faith into it that they inevitably get disappointed, and then somehow it's my fault. Oh well. Anyway, do you have Briller Jeopardy tonight?
Yes, I do. By the way, I think that in coming years, you talked about, everybody wants to know about how the winter is specifically on long range forecast. I'm going to predict that in the next 5 years, a lot of people are going to be more concerned about what summer brings as opposed to winter because of the wildfires, the potential hurricane threats, the smoke plumes, the heavy drenching downpours that occur in parts of the country. It may turn out to be that more people become more concerned about what happens in the summer as opposed to what happens in the winter. Maybe it's because the winter will, the potential for blizzards and frigid outbreaks, sort of thing, that'll be diminishing. And what will be increasing will be the spells of heat and the wildfires and the floods and everything else in the summertime. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the coming next few years.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. I'll say this, Joe. With the checkbook analogy, uh, when when we went through that period from 1970 to 1976, 1970, oh, the winter of 76, 77, it was normal snowfall. But um, there was that period where it was below normal for like 7 years in a row, and then you had a big year in 78. You went from basically from 83 to 92. You went 9 years with mostly below normal snowfall in a row in New York City, the New York City area. And then you had the winter of 93, 94, and then you had the blockbuster winter of 95, 96. But 94, 95 was a single digit winter. And then the four winters that followed the 95, 96 winter were as bad as the last two. Okay. So think about the last two winters and now have two more. So James Davidson, this notion that you keep pointing back to about the idea that we don't get a real winter pattern anymore. That was that was true if you look at the years from 2000 to 2020. But if you go to look from the years 1970 to 2000, this is what it was like most of the time. So, maybe maybe I said this, I said this a few weeks ago. I'll say it again. Maybe that 20-year upcycle that we were in, because clearly that was an upcycle. Maybe it's done, and now we're going back. Now we're in a down cycle, and we may be in a down cycle for 20 years,
Yeah, in
maybe
fact,
30, maybe 30 years.
I just put on the. I'm just sharing, Joe, the front page of Time magazine. This is December 3rd, 1973. The caricature is of Archie Bunker sitting in his favorite chair, and the big freeze, because in that issue, they were talking about how scientists believe that we were heading for another ice age. And if how things changed over the next 40 years. Now, of course, everybody is talking about global warming and how we may never return to colder conditions. And this is a cycle that does not favor cold weather or frigid temperatures for many, many years to come. But
Time,
that's how.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I mean, this is the 50 years ago. This is what the thoughts were, that we were heading for an ice age. And again, we have changed so much in our concept and ideas as to what is going to happen now as compared to way back when.
Time magazine has a long history of putting up magazine covers that point out trends that wind up ending when they put those magazine covers up. For example, one big one that they did, for those of you who follow the stock market, the one well-known one they did was in 1980 when the front cover was the death of equities. Okay, I think it was Time magazine. The death of equities, that stocks were no longer going to return, um, you know, gains in the long term, that, everything was going downhill. And that cover hit when the Dow Jones Industrials was at 800. Okay. And it's now at 38,000. So it's 40, almost 40, 45, 46 times. If you put in a dollar, you would have $46. If you put a dollar in with that 19, when they put out that magazine cover in the stock market, you'd have $46. So do the math. If you put in $1,000, you would have $46,000. So much for Time Magazine, and um, their they're putting up covers. If Time Magazine puts up a cover, or any standard magazine puts a cover up that says that it'll never snow again, that the days of snowstorms are gone, and the days of snow accumulations are gone, you know that it's time to start looking in the other direction. That's what you got to hope for a magazine cover.
Okay, well,
Anyway, you got Briller Jeopardy?
yes, indeed. And tonight on Briller Jeopardy, average high temperature in the month of February for actually 6 cities. We have the 5 cities which are normal for the category, and then we have the bonus city. But first, let's start off with Atlantic City. The average high temperature in February in Atlantic City.
I will say 40. I'll say 43.
Not quite, Joe.
Too
A
low?
little, no, yeah, a little on the low side.
Okay. Um, Donald Colgan says 45.
And Donald is correct. There
Okay.
you go.
Mark
40.
France Sr. said 45. And William Uber says 45. All right, next one. And
Uh,
Christopher Bear said 45 too.
all right.
I
Well,
got a frog in my throat tonight.
how about Toronto? Tonto.
Toronto? Oh
The
gosh.
average high temperature in February in Toronto,
Well,
Canada.
Detroit was, what was Detroit the other day? 33?
I believe something like that. Yeah.
All right, so I'll say 31.
Joe, between Detroit and your guess for Toronto, you're literally surrounding the correct answer.
Oh, okay. So then it was 32.
0 Celsius, 32 Fahrenheit, Toronto, average high temperature in February.
Well, Izzy D got it at 32. And Craig Carlberg was off by one at 31. So was Chris Alley.
Frank Scalera,
And, and
32.
Frank Scalera got 32. Okay. And Mark Francine said 1 Celsius. 33.
How about Skinneapolis, Minneapolis?
Skinneapolis?
Yeah. Actually, isn't there a place in New York? Skinneapolis, New York, or
I don't know.
well, anyway.
I will say, I don't know. They're pretty far north. It does get cold up there. I don't know. 24?
That's it gets cold, but not that cold.
Okay. Izzy D said 27. Jason Fox said 26. Patrick Darcy said 29.
But
Anthony,
Frank Karajat, is that how we pronounce that, Joe?
Karajit, I think.
Karajit?
29.
Congratulations, Frank. You got it. 29.
All right, next.
Next one, New York Central Park at the Belvedere Castle.
Well, the month starts at 30. Well, I didn't. I've not looked at the new normals. So the month used to start at at 38 and end at 46. It's a slow rise. So I'll say 42.
And where's the bell? Where's the bell? I don't know if we hit 100 yet, but
No, we're
the,
at 89.
the
Only
bell.
89 likes tonight.
Oh,
The
but
the audience is thin tonight.
well, we did start. We did get a late start, so
Yes.
it threw people off. That 7:35 is habit for a lot of people.
No,
How
I
about
understand.
how about Nantucket?
Nantucket. Uh, it's a funny place when you get to do the shores, places that are on the coast. Uh, I'll say I'll say 40.
Oh dear, get the bell again. 40 is correct. 40 Fahrenheit or 4 Celsius, if you will.
Right.
Let's do the bonus city, and that is Juneau.
They're on the coast. Oh God. I want to say, hmm, that's hard. They're on the coast though.
Well, John Melander got it.
Well, don't tell me. I have to move my eyes now. I got chat board on two computer things. So I don't want to see either one. I'll say 30.
Not quite Snake Country, but you were just a little bit too
Too
high.
high. I just saw it, 28.
And Mark Franz Sr. got it as well.
Okay.
28 degrees.
And we're
At,
4 likes short of 100. Do we have to go out, stick the tin cup out to beg for 4 likes? Oh, well. All right. I appreciate everybody's indulgence tonight for the late start, but we will be back to normal tomorrow. So tomorrow is at 7:35 p.m. and tomorrow hopefully we'll have Alan Casper on for the show. And in the meantime, the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, brought to you by Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system, and you too can join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is on the descriptor to this podcast. Use the coupon code coupon code winter2324, and if you do, you will get.
well, first of all, we got a bell because it's 102 on the likes.
Right.
Thank you. And you'll get 10% off.
That was a lame bell ring. Ring it properly.
Right. Well, we rang it so many times for you, Joe. How's that?
Perfect.
Very good.
All right. So everybody, keep your fingers crossed, and we'll have a fun show tomorrow night. We will see you tomorrow. Nighty night.
Nighty night, folks.